All right, so
Episode 6, Part 2, how to deal with MAGA or MAGA light. Do you cut them off? Do you hang on to them? Do you put them at arm's length? I was thinking about it. I've had at least a few times in my life where somebody more than ghosted me. Like, I just couldn't figure out why the fuck I couldn't reach them. I was, doing everything. I still don't know. My point is that it's extremely frustrating, and I tend to not do that, partly for that reason, because I hate it when it's done to me. But I just did that to my MAGA buddy about a month ago, to the point where he finally reached out to my wife, who I had explained the situation, and she finally texted him back and said he doesn't want to deal with you, and neither do I, and then she blocked him. It's a question of, I don't know. I think it's a question of has it reached a point of no return for whatever reason, where it's they've said or done something or supported a position that you just can't condone anymore.
right, and I think you know I'll say things like, oh yeah, just cut them off, blah blah blah. But in all reality, I think what I'm doing in most cases is it's a case by case basis.
Yeah.
And as Al put it, if you set a boundary and they continue to break it, that's it. Like, if you set a boundary and they break it and there's no consequence, then there's no
Right.
boundary. And they have to understand that, like, there's going to be certain issues. And if the issue, there's a lot of issues right now involving, MAGA that are just core value issues about, basic human decency and humanity. And basic human rights. And if you're having a discussion with them and they're not supporting human rights in any way, shape, or form, then yeah, in my estimation, it's probably time to just say, you know what, we are so far apart, and this is not a political thing. Like, I can't be friends with somebody who has this belief system you have, and this is not, everything's sort of political in the end, but this is not even political. This is you being a horrible person. I don't want to deal with you. But at least in my opinion.
And this is just me, but going back to the particular situation, I think of what I've discovered is that this whole idea of agree to disagree. No, screw that. But we can agree just not to talk about it. That's different. Mm-hmm. So I have another friend, mutual friend with this guy, and I had lunch with him recently, and I brought up politics just enough to kind of say, you still believe that, because she's kind of MAGA, and I believe this. And I didn't even go into policies or anything, just, you're more conservative is about all I said. And I was like, okay, and I said, do you have any reason why we need to talk about any of that stuff? And she's like, no. I was like, okay, then we're not going to. And we moved on. And it was kind of like that with my other buddy, where we kind of agreed that we weren't going to talk about this stuff. And then he deliberately brought it up several times in a row, and that's when I went, you know what? I could tolerate stuff that I probably shouldn't have tolerated when we weren't talking about it, but if you're going to make a point of not letting me forget, then that's it,
Look, there's going to be situations in most people's lives, at work or wherever, where there's people you're going to have to interact with. We're living in a society here.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to be civil. And I think your approach is the best approach. We're not going to talk about this. Whatever issues that we have to deal with at hand that are absolutely necessary for us to talk about, we can. Other than that, I don't want to talk to you. And that's the way. And then, like you said, just address it in that way. It's best we don't talk about these issues and we stick to the task at hand.
Right. This might feel like a real tangent, maybe not. But my wife just pointed out that there's a musician that we saw him in concert before, and I listened to his stuff, and I thought, okay, guy. And then she said, no, he's supporting MAGA. They just shut down his concert in San Antonio. He had to find a different place to play. I was like, really? So I looked it up, and I thought, maybe he just made some offhand comments here, there, or whatever. Well, his offhand comments were supporting the Proud Boys for January 6th, and that was like, no. So, you got to look stuff up, because you'll hear things about people, and then if you don't know what they've actually said or done, sometimes it's overblown. Sometimes it is, but other times it's like this, and I went, oh crap, I like the guy, but no, I can't go there.
And that's
anymore.
not on a personal level. That's just like
Yeah.
like maybe you don't support him now. You don't go to his concert.
Yeah, and I mean, I might still listen to his music, but
Right.
I mean, it's
I mean, there's some you could talk
there are
about,
lines, yeah.
You could talk about Picasso and Dali and their how horrible they were with their wives and women, and how Dali was probably pretty fascist, and but I still like their art.
Yeah.
But when I break things down at the end of the day, I don't try to worship any man or person or statue or flag or nation. I like to admire ideas and principles. I know a flag can stand for that, but that, like I said, a flag represents so many people and things. And maybe in some cases it's okay, but for me, no statues, no flags, no anything. Just maybe a monument to an idea, and maybe that's what a flag is in some sense. But you get my point.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna freaking pledge allegiance to shit, except for peace and love,
Right.
and do unto others. That's about it. Otherwise, I have no allegiance to anything. And my opinions can change all the time as facts and situations change. And I think that's the best way to approach things in life. But yeah. Have we exhausted this conversation?
Yeah,
it's a case-by-case basis. Trying to establish whether or not that individual is making any headway whatsoever, setting up boundaries. If they cross that boundary, trying to get a bag here, a shit bag. I got it, Al. More than okay. And and establishing a relationship in that regard, in terms of boycotting a specific person or a company. Once again, that's up to the individual on a case-by-case basis. How much can you tolerate from some kind of crap from that in that regard? But
I think just about exhausted that one, or at least for this week.
For this week, and it'll probably come up again because, like I said, I waffle all the time.
And I know we brought this one up more than once, and even some of the specific points more than once. So
right.
Again, it'll come up again, but.
Right, because it's just pervasive everywhere in terms of how do we move forward and how do we solve this problem. And if you completely excommunicate yourself from everyone and don't try to work with anyone, look, for certain individuals, the more you ostracize them and push them away, the more they're going to double down, and it's going to have the reverse effect. So using some discernment or some discretion in whether or not you want to engage is up to you. That's all I think. Obviously,
But it's like yesterday at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we had somebody knock on the door, and I was like, "Oh, who could it be?" And I opened it up, and it's somebody wanting to sell us windows or something. And I just looked at the guy, and I looked right to my left, and I pointed at the sign that we have that says "No solicitors," and then I practically slammed the door in his face. And I was thinking, on top of all that, it's a Saturday, dude. Come on.
Well, I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about.
But there was a point to, I don't know.
I guess it's a boundary that you said.
The boundary, that was the point. The boundaries, that was it.
They're not.
Okay.
I don't know who's knocking on doors these days. That's weird. I mean,
we get people regularly in our neighborhood.
That's really weird, man. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up with this topic.
Yep.